Okay, welcome, folks. We've got another amazing guest. His name is Ian White from Australia. His website is Oz Flowers, as in AUSFLOWERS.com .au, and he's going to give us some wonderful information, ways that people can help themselves, go on the workshops, and everything else that Ian's been involved in. So let's bring in Ian. Hi, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thanks, John.
Wonderful to have you here. Let's get straight into it. Just for the people, because I use them and utilize them in my clinic. I still get people asking, what are flower essences? How do they work? What are they all about? So if we can take it from there.
Okay. Basically, we're working on emotional and spiritual healing with the premise that physical symptoms stem from emotional and spiritual imbalances. And if you correct the former, then the physical will take care of itself. Now, we're working with flowers because the flower is the most evolved part of the plant. So it's a very ancient healing art, which can trace back to most cultures, going back many thousands of years ago. The first earliest recorded use was about 3,000 years ago in Egypt. On papyrus, they wrote of collecting flowers and collecting the dew of the flowers to treat emotional imbalances. The earliest recorded European use was back in the 11th century, and there was a woman called Hildegard von Bingen. Her music is still very famous and played today, and she was an abbess who ran a monastery in Germany. Bingen is a tributary off the Rhine. Mm-hmm. And she was officially classified by the Catholic Church as a prophet. From a young age, about 8, she started describing getting information coming through her center of her forehead like light. We talk about the third eye being opened. And she brought through a lot of very radical ideas for that period about education, especially for women, and healing and music, the arts. And she would have the nuns in the monastery put muslin sheets over the flowers at night. In the morning, the sheets were collected, the dew was wrung out, and would be given to people to treat emotional imbalances. And if someone was very ill physically, then be wrapped in those same muslin sheets. And of course, Paracelsus in the 16th century also championed the cause of collecting the dew of flowers to treat emotional imbalances. And, there are history of the Australian Aborigines in South America and Japan, again, of working either with the flowers. Some cultures used to float the flowers in water like the Australian Aborigines and drink the water. And they would leave the flowers out in direct sunlight. And the basic premise there was the sun would extract the healing vibration, almost like homeopathics, from the flowers, which would be then entered into the water. And that water was then consumed. And the Australian Aborigines, they used to do that method. Sometimes they'd also eat the flowers, knowing that not only was there nutritionist value from the flowers, but also that emotional healing. And if the flower couldn't be eaten, sometimes they would sit people next to that flower or to that tree which was in flower to absorb the vibration of the plant. Mm-hmm. And it seems like a lot of that information was lost in the 19th century. And Edward Bach, who was an English doctor, he lived in from 1886 to 1936, and he really brought forward this ancient healing art once more into public awareness. And he worked with 38 English flowers. Mm-hmm. In fact, he mentioned just before he died that there would be a number of other flowers coming through, and that his remedies would have a major impact for 50 years. And it was actually on the exact year, that 50th year, mm-hmm. that I started making up the bush essences, which, made from Australian plants, which are made from all parts of Australia. And Australia has a very unique flora and landscape. According to geologists, erosion occurred first in Australia, which produced the first soil, and the botanists agree that Australia had the first flowering plants. It also has the highest number of flowering plants in the world. And it's a very pristine environment. So where I prepare the essences, it's from physical pollution like power lines, roads, electromagnetic radiation, etc. But it's also the energetic, pristine environment. Like I spend probably half the year teaching bush essence workshops around the world. And sometimes, you go to Europe and I might be teaching in a workshop where, in the Second World War or First World War, tens of thousands of people died violently, very close to where I was teaching. And energetically, it leaves like a psychic pollution in that environment. And Australia was quite fortunate in that the Aborigines were not a very warlike people, and there was also 300,000 of them scattered throughout a very large continent when European settlement arrived. And, where I go to prepare the essences, I make sure that there's certainly very pristine environments where there's very little human impact in that space.
That's fantastic. And then, Ian, how long have they been used for, in the sense where you at the moment? Because I pretty much only use the Australian ones in my clinic, because I just find they're just extremely powerful, and that's why I've wanted you to come on. But your particular ones, you said you started at the birth of the 50 years of
So I started releasing the essences in 1986.
Yeah.
So, it's been 27 years late. And, I have 69 remedies from all regions. We've got alpine areas, we've got deserts, we've got tropical regions. So they're from, temperate rainforest areas, they're coming from all those regions, and from those individual 69, which practitioners such as yourself would either give singly or combine together for the specific needs of their patients. We also have a number of combinations which are also available. So we find that a lot of health food shops, for example, pharmacies will sell the combinations which are already made up. So if someone was having a difficulty in a relationship or there was learning problems, that they would go in and there'd be a specific essence already made up for that. Whereas if a practitioner had the kit of the 69 remedies, then they could blend their own specific remedy for someone, or they could just use the same remedies that we do in those combinations. And there's also a skincare range we have with them. We have oral sprays, we have oral mists, so you can work on in an environment as well. So many practitioners would use a space clearing spray. So at the end of the day, people have been pouring out all their problems, and energetically there's quite a build-up in there. So a lot of practitioners will just spray their clinic or the pharmacy or the health food store at the end of the day, where people have been talking all about their problems. And I mentioned I travel a great deal. One of the first things I pack is the space clearing, because, you arrive at a hotel, you don't know who has been in that hotel before you. Were they, having, a couple in there having, a very bad time, arguing a great deal? Did someone die of a heart attack in that room just before you got there? All of those things, first, as soon as I arrive in the hotel, I'll use the space clearing spray just to, clear that environment.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you say that, because in your books, which if you can just let us know, I was fortunate enough to be in Australia, so I managed to get your books. But are those available on Kindle, purely through your websites, through Amazon? Where can one purchase your books?
Look, they can get them certainly from Amazon. They're not on Kindle at this point, but certainly Amazon, from our website. If you very kindly gave our website at the beginning of the interview, and, we list on that distributors. We have distributors in over 30 countries, so people can usually find a distributor close by, or they can, order directly from us on the net and we'll send it out to them, or you've mentioned from Amazon for the books as well.
And what I find as well, and this is just through obviously working with people from the most basic emotional, mental issues to specific illnesses. And I found the mixture for the cerebral palsy, literally within weeks, there was a change in this child's learning abilities, and they were just purely on your flower essences. So I'm going to say to the audience that these are extremely powerful, but yet so loving and gentle, because that's the energy that they come from. And then, Ian, I wanted to ask you, a lot of people ask, are they safe to use? So if we could go into that.
I think that's one of the very positive aspects of flower essences, is that you don't have to be a practitioner like yourself, or a pharmacist, or someone who's trained in acupuncture or medicine, studied many years in those modalities to be able to use flower essences. And of course those people still can, but I get very excited at the workshops where you might have a parent or a couple who've come because they want to learn more about the essence so they can use them on their children. I get very excited by that. In fact, at the workshops, I always ask the people, was anyone there brought up on flower essences when they were a child? And, very rarely. And, I get people to reflect on their own childhood and think how different would it have been if your parents had been knowing about the bush essences, being able to give them to you. And, just all the various things that people go through in their life. And certainly for children, the essences work very quickly. Mm. They're also very safe. So, you don't have to be medically trained to recognize, for example, that, your daughter's not very, well because she didn't get invited to the birthday party that most of the class did. So she's feeling very rejected, or, that there might be some sadness because, the pet dog died and it's been a number of months, but that child's not got over it yet, or maybe they lost a grandparent. And so it's quite straightforward to identify those emotional states and being able to give the essences to the children based on purely what you're observing without having to sort of know anatomy or physiology. Mm. And of course, the more training that you have, maybe in various therapies, acupuncturists can look at a people and body language and look at the tongue and get straight away an insight. Someone doing naturopathic might look at iridology and say, oh, gee, the kidneys are really very weak with this person. So the emotion associated with kidneys is fear, and the essence of a remedy called dog rose for fear and anxiety also has a very positive effect on the kidneys. In fact, one of my books is called Happy Healthy Kids, and it was just the bush essences, how they use them for children. And in our newsletter, we asked people to, please send in any of your case histories of you working with the children. And I'd say that by far the highest number of case histories for any one problem area was with bedwetting. Mm. And dog rose, together with a flower called the red helmet orchid, which deals with authority figures and what have you, those two combined together produce brilliant results for children. And by age 5, probably about 10% of children are still bedwetting. Now, if they get to 7 and the child's still bedwetting, it has quite big implications. At age 7, if they've got a good solid foundation and nurturing and love in the family home, they're ready to sort of go outwards and break a little bit further away from the family, become a little bit more independent. So you find that sleepovers are starting to happen a lot more at age 7 onwards than what it was before that. Now, if a child's bedwetting, there's usually some embarrassment, shame occurring, and they will find all sorts of reasons not to go on the bedwetting because they don't want their friends to realise they've got this problem. And I said those two remedies just so quickly clear it up. In fact, there was a workshop I was teaching in Argentina, and one of the practitioners there shared her story that she had just treated very successfully a boy who was 10 for bedwetting. Now, prior to the mother bringing the child to that practitioner, the family had spent thousands of dollars going to the United States for a clinic for his bedwetting. Didn't have any good results. Now, the second consultation, the father turned up as well because he couldn't believe that a little bottle was able to do something that all his money couldn't afford in the United States. And the practitioner also suggested it would be a good idea if the mother brought the father along, because the father was a very successful man. He was very powerful, both, career-wise, but also in his build. He was a very intimidating man. And he felt his son was a little bit too effeminate. And his idea was to, toughen him up, make him a man. So he was very tough on his son. And, the son was in deep fear of his father. Now, I said fear in Chinese medicine affects the kidneys, and his bedwetting was directly related to the fear, but also the red helmet works on father issues, but also problems with authority. Now, in this case, the father was that big authority issue, and so that essence just worked so nicely for it. And the father was quite shocked when the practitioner explained his role in why his son was bedwetting. And, the father went away with some essences and was able to make some changes in his parenting style and had a much closer, loving relationship with his son as a consequence.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you say that, because what I found is a lot of my work's very much intuitive, and then I dissect and see what needs to be given. But for the very hardcore thinkers, what I do is, which is amazing in your books, you give the negatives and the positives within the personality. So what I've done is now a lot of them that are very in their left brain will read the information, and then the last bit we get to the positives and negatives. And then that's the aha moment. And then they say to me, but this is what we discussed. And I said, yes, fantastic. You've needed to read it. And I find the healing process is speeded up a lot quicker as well when they actually have that realization that this is the negative state they're sitting in. This is the positive outcome, the possibilities. So that's been an amazing help I'm sure for other therapists as well, and I really thank you for that, Ian. Just to the next question, how did you become involved in flower essences? Where did the journey start?
Oh, sorry, can I just add one point to that?
Yes.
A lot of modalities are used when there's a problem, but I think the nice thing with the flower essences, you can use it to enhance a quality, even though it may not be all that low, but you want to, let's say a typical one might be self-esteem, self-confidence. Someone might have, some good confidence, but they want to boost it up even more. So you can use it to enhance the quality as well, like really work to bring that positive one out, even when the negative side mightn't be as marked.
And what you've just said now is exactly what I've observed, because I've been using your flower essence range with the white light, which we'll get into, and the other ones since 2005, and I've had phenomenal results. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, thanks, Ian. But just coming back to the question about your involvement, how you got involved, is it in your family lineage? Where did this all begin for you?
I was very fortunate to grow up living next door to my grandmother. And for those not familiar with Sydney, I grew up in a suburb called Terry Hills, which is about an hour northwest of Sydney. Now, it backs onto a national park. And so I had a great playground as a young boy growing up, sort of with what we call the bush. I know this is going to be heard on US radio, and in Australia we refer to the bush as any wilderness area, basically. Sometimes in the States they think bush just refers to the size of a plant. In one of my books, we had a US publisher who asked if I could maybe change the name of our company away from Australian bush flower essence, because they thought there might be some political bias that people might have towards the name. So they were upset when we said, no, you're stuck with it. But my grandmother, and along with her mother, my great-grandmother, were the first white people to seriously study the medicinal properties of Australian plants. And my great-great-grandmother, she came across from Europe to work in Australia as a herbalist in the 1850s. Similar to the United States, in California, we had a gold rush at that same time. And so she came across as a herbalist working with all the miners for alcohol poisoning, mines collapsing on people, probably the nutrition wasn't very good. I'm sure they had all sorts of health problems. And and as a young boy, I grew up next to my grandmother. I feigned illness very regularly. My father was a pharmacist. He'd go off to work, and my mum would be taking my brother and I to school, and I'd be doubled up with pain, or pretending to be doubled up with pain, and saying, "Oh no, I really want to go to school." And she'd say, "No, I think you're far too ill. You better go down with your grandmother today." And I'd make this miraculous recovery as soon as I could hear my mum driving off to work, and I'd help my grandmother make up all her herbal tinctures and extracts. And we'd spend a lot of time bushwalking, and she'd point out the plants and what their healing qualities were. Now, she was working as a herbalist more with the physical aspects, like, the alkaloids, the tannins, etc. And I don't remember specifically which plants did which. She died when I was 10, unfortunately. But, I was left with the legacy that in the bush there are many plants of healing qualities. And I suppose what I've gone on and continued that family lineage, and my father, even though he was a pharmacist, was also a herbalist as well, is been looking at not just the physical properties of plants, but looking more that emotional and spiritual healing quality of the plants. And every flower has a healing quality. Some will express it more often. I have more fully than others. Like I mentioned that remedy, the dog rose for fear. There are 3 other flowers in Australia that I know work with fear, but the dog rose embodies it more fully. That's the one I tend to work with. But every flower has a healing quality. And I suppose I've been drawn very much by the plants rather than, me sitting at home thinking, oh, geez, there's nothing on TV, I'll go and make a flower essence. I'm really waiting for the plant to contact me, either intuitively, in dreams, or something to really grab me, let know that plant is ready to have an essence made from it. And I suppose some of the art very much is tuning into determining what healing quality that plant has. And there's one technique which involves what's known as the Doctrine of Signatures, a term Paracelsus, a very famous herbalist from the 16th century, coined, whereby the shape, the color, and the location of the plant are the clues nature is giving as to the healing quality of that particular plant. And so, like I mentioned, there's some unique features in the Australian plant. We have a very high proportion of red and purple flowers here in Australia. In Europe, it's a lot more white and blue. In the US, a lot more yellow, for example. Now, in colour therapy, red is energy, vitality, and certainly there's that energy in the land here in Australia. It's very deep, ancient wisdom. But there's that spirituality of the land as well, which is reflected in the purple. So you'll find that the bush essences can work very deeply, but they can also got that energy and vibrancy to work very quickly in getting there as well.
Yeah, and also just for the audience to understand that the audience does reach USA, Europe, China, Australia, South Africa, and South America. So we've got a broad listenership, Ian. Which is good because then we're getting the message across. Also, just another question, just to sidetrack a little bit. What I was told intuitively very much last year is this year's very much a year of people finding modalities, alternative modalities to work with. And again, I'm going to say the flower essences, the Australian ones, I just find them so gentle, but yet so deep and powerful. And then the philosophy behind, the deeper philosophies behind the bushflower essences, Ian?
Well, as I mentioned, that I think the basic premise with the flower essences is that our physical symptoms are more a pointer or a tap on the shoulder. Hey, look, there's an imbalance here you need to take attention of. The bush essences are really wonderful in that there's not side effects. Sometimes there can be what's known as a healing crisis. For example, we have a remedy called the Old Man Banksia, and it works very much on the thyroid. So, a brilliant remedy if there's underactive thyroid activity. And 40% of women over the age of 40 in Western countries have underactive thyroids. for some people, when they take that remedy, and it's a small percentage, but some notice a tightness around their throat for a few days. So that's like a healing crisis. The energy is working and, balancing that area. They can feel things a little bit more fully. Now, sometimes that can happen on an emotional level. There's one case history I always remember, very, very profound experience this woman had. She was a very well-known healer in England and Australia. She'd been the personal secretary to the Maharishi previously. And when she came to see me, she couldn't even sit down in the chair. She was so much in pain and crippled with arthritis. And, when we, did the consultation, just talking about like what had happened, when did it start, what was going on in her life, she mentioned it started shortly after her husband left her for a younger woman. And, on that basis, I gave her a remedy called the Sturt Desert Pea, really beautiful flower with a black center and, in that red pea-like flower. And it's for grief and sadness. And she rang me back 4 days later to say that she hadn't stopped crying since taking that flower. And, some of the sadness which she wasn't fully in touch with just really poured out. And so sometimes that emotional release can be a little bit stronger. If someone's taking a remedy for maybe resentment, they might feel the resentment stronger. Not that they're going to, run amok and injure people, but, it's just part of sometimes experiencing that for a few days. And this particular woman, not only did she say that she hadn't stopped crying for the 4 days, but the deformity and the pain had totally left. Now, if you were to go to a rheumatologist and say that, you could get that deformity in someone's hands from, that arthritis could go in 4 days. I mean, they just laugh at you and say you're a crazy person. And yet it's amazing when you address the cause of a problem, how the flow and effect in the body, can start to heal itself and get very profound shifts.
Yeah. And then, just a question. If someone's been taking the Bund essence for some time, and other aspects in their life, like their spirituality is becoming more awake, but their financial aspects are still struggling. What would you recommend for them to take? Just keep on taking the Bund essence?
And for those who may be not so familiar with flower essences, when I'm talking about, say, a Sturt Desert Rose, or John's mentioning the Bund essence, the flower essence come in a liquid form. And, the recommendation for the bush essence is taking 7 drops in the morning and 7 at night. Usually have it by your bedside table. First thing on waking up, you take it because it really helps program what you want to achieve in the day. And last thing at night, you'll find that the person's brain waves are starting to go a little bit deep into alpha and theta. So, it's a very good time to be taking a remedy. You can work quite quickly and very deeply. And what we recommend is if you're dealing with emotional states, we've mentioned maybe fear or grief, for example, we normally suggest taking the remedy for 2 weeks. There's no harm certainly in repeating it more than that. If you're dealing with more physical problems, then we recommend that you need to take it probably for at least a month. And in naturopathic college, I was taught for every year you have the problem, you need to treat it for a month. Now, the bush essences work a lot quicker than that, but you give it a little bit longer if there's a physical symptom, because if you haven't resolved that emotion, whether it's the grief or the fear, it will gradually settle in on the physical body. So you mentioned there are people in Brazil listening. We've been donating a number of the essences for many years to the orphanages in Brazil. And when we started this work, on average, the children were getting 6 to 7 cases of bronchitis each child each year. It was also giving the government quite a lot of reais, the Brazilian currency. After a year of the flower essences being administered to the orphanages, and, not always were there enough staff to make individual bottles. Sometimes it was just the cook putting it in the food and the drinks of the children. The incidence of the bronchitis had dropped to less than 1 case per child per year. Why were they getting bronchitis? Well, in Chinese medicine, the lungs corresponds to the emotion of grief. So if you've got a lot of unresolved grief, then you're more likely to have lung problems. It could be bronchitis, pneumonia, what have you. And so here we were, all these young children who didn't have parents. The parents might have been dead. There was a lot of alcohol and drug use, or they were not wanted, or for whatever reason, there was that lack of the parents' love and presence in their life. So there was obviously a lot of sadness going on. So, if you were treating someone for lung problems, it means they've had that grief probably for quite some time, which is why you end up using the remedy more frequently. So coming back to your question, John, of, someone working with the abundance, if they've already taken it for some time, I would think probably wouldn't hurt taking it for a month. If they want to repeat it, maybe use it for 2 weeks at a time. The other 2 weeks, you can work on some of the other issues. And probably the last case history I had was a woman told me about her son, that he was an apprentice chef. He was 17. He was finishing work in the restaurant very late at night and was finding it difficult getting home on public transport. So she put him on the Abundessence. And after about a week of being on that essence, there was a radio program he listened to, and they would have a mystery person from the station, and they would say which suburb, or they'd give clues as to what suburb in Sydney that person was. And they didn't have a sign indicating what's, their station identity or anything else like that. So you had to go up to people in that suburb, and there was a phrase, are you from radio station XYZ? And, this particular young man, he thought, oh, this is the suburb I live in. And he went out, and the first two people he asked, they just gave him very strange looks like, who are you? But he persevered, and he went up to the third person, and it was the fellow from the radio station, and he won a new car. And, we hear some amazing tales people write in, from winning lotteries to being given gifts to all sorts of things that's happening when they've been on Abundessence. So, and some of the essences in there, one of it is for sabotage. Some people on a subconscious level, not conscious, believe they don't deserve to have money, or they've got made a belief that maybe money is dirty, or that you can't be spiritual and financial at the same time. So you find one of the remedies in the Abundessence helps to clear the sabotage people have on the subconscious around money. There's also ones for helping manifest, having stewardship over your goods, and also generosity, really opening up your heart in sharing what you have, because, when you open up the heart chakra, you also attract things back in. So, I would, there's certainly some good remedies in there. So my suggestion would continue it, maybe take it for 2 weeks and another essence for 2 weeks of the month.
Definitely, and it's amazing that you said that, because on last week Wednesday, my apologies, last week Wednesday, we had a lady talking about heart, working from heart, and it's exactly what you said, because that's how we achieve and create and co-create some really amazing stuff. And then all the information for the listeners is on your website. It's ausflowers.com.au. And that's also offers the audience a description of what where they can purchase them. And then you've got therapists around the globe. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have many. As I mentioned, I'm regularly running workshops, around the world, and through Europe, North and South America. And I've also trained other teachers. We have teachers in Europe, in the States, in the UK, many here in Australia. So it's not just me running the workshops as well. So they can click onto the ausflowers.com.au website, and they can look under education, and it lists workshops international and within Australia as well.
Yeah, and I believe you've also got some correspondence courses going on there.
Yeah, we have 2 correspondence courses. So if you're prefer to be studying at your own pace and at home, or maybe there's you're a long way from where workshops are being held, we have a 60-hour course on the bush essences, and you have a tutor assisting you, and there's assignments that get marked, etc. And also an animal correspondence course, which is a self-tutoring course. So, there's lots of opportunity to, be studying, even though you may not be able to get to a workshop. Or like yourself, John, getting the books and reading it and building up your knowledge and experience that way, which is allowing you to work with the essences. And, in the back of my books, there's emotional and physical repertories. So, like if you're working with cerebral palsy, there's also the suggestions what essences are related to that condition, which might be useful for you then to, prepare your combinations and treat.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing because the mother came back to me and said that the teachers came back to him and said, what are you doing to your child? Because his marks have increased, his work is increased. And, because they're very close at some schools, she didn't say anything, but she said it's definitely the flower essence because, he's not taking anything else. So, they've seen, and hopefully, sometime soon we can have you here in South Africa. But we'll discuss it. Ian, for stress, I know in Ireland when I was hosting on one of the other radio shows, they were talking about this huge amounts of people committing suicide because of the financial happenings there. What would you recommend for stress-related issues?
Yeah, certainly. Look, and I might just go back to that original issue you mentioned too with suicide. I think every person would know of someone who was suicided. It touches, every family at some level, and it's the good news is that the numbers have started to stabilize, and in some countries, of course, it's quite horrendous. In India, for example, with farmers, it's particularly bad. In the rural communities, it's very high in Australia as well. And in many Western countries, it's the most common cause of death for men under 25. And the sad thing that's starting to happen is there are a lot more younger women suiciding, in this last decade than what there has been prior. That's the area where there's a big spike in suicide. And you can just even try to imagine the anguish and pain someone is in if their best option to them is just to kill themselves. How deeply must they be distraught and suffering? And there's a particular flower. It's called the waratah. It's probably the most popular flower in Australia. It would have been the floral emblem of the country, except it doesn't grow throughout the country. It's just found in a couple of the states. And the waratah was the highest flower for the Australian Aborigines. It was the only one that they gave to the white settlers. And in 1991, my company hosted the 3rd International Flower Essence Conference. We had speakers from around the world, and we had a fellow from England, Eric Pelham, who is the chief blender from a company there called Orosoma, which some of your listeners will be familiar with, which is the two coloured bottles. And it's working very much with colour therapy. And in Eric's talk, he was dealing with what we call the DEVA, the DEVA, which is like the guardian angel, if you like, of the plants. And according to Eric's research, that there were 5 master flowers on the planet, and one of them was the waratah. And, waratah is that black night of the soul, total despair, when someone is suicidal. Now, it's a very, very deep acting remedy and very powerful. If you've got someone who's suicidal, you can't very well say, well, we'll take this for 2 weeks, and if you're still suicidal, keep taking it. They're not going to be there at the end of that 2 weeks if nothing's worked. So the 3 and 4 days is able to grab someone by the scruff of the neck and pull them back. And probably one of the most satisfying aspects of all the feedback I've got is from people in countries I've never been to, people I've never met, who've been able to use the waratah to save loved ones, or, patients who've been, in that black night of the soul, who've been very, contemplating suicide. And I chose the Waratah as the emblem of the Australian bush flower essences, just because back there in 86, I saw, we're going through tremendous change, and this remedy gives you that strength and courage to hang in there when things aren't particularly easy. We've had a number of economic crashes and, people going through very challenging experience in their life. Maybe it's, addiction to drugs, or there's been divorce, or self-worth, projects destroyed, whatever it might be, grief. And the Waratah, when someone's in that bad state, really pulls them back.
Yeah.
Now, there's a combination, which is made up of a number of the essences, which we call the calm and clear. And that's a really good one for stress. I mean, there is, at the end of a day, for example, when someone, can't sleep, the mind's racing, body's tense with all the stress they've been building up, there is remedies in that combination, releasing the tightness in the muscles, but also working on the mind too, just to sort of stop all the thoughts. I've got to do this, do that, slowing down so they can go more within and relax a bit more. And, you'll find that anyone who's living in a large populated town or city, they're likely to be, feeling stressed a lot more than someone in a more rural environment where the pace is a little bit slower. In fact, you go to cities like London, New York, and, Johannesburg, places like that, and, it's a frantic, frenetic pace, and people get caught up in that. Very patient, things have to happen immediately, and road rage, and et cetera, et cetera. So you'll find that combination is a really excellent one for general stress levels.
Yeah, sorry?
You mentioned, the child with cerebral palsy doing very well at school. For children, one of the big stresses is, like exams and, maybe not studying as well or doing as well in the classroom, not understanding things. And there's a combination called Cognis, Cognis. And we've had children in primary or high school who aren't doing very well, look like they're going to have to repeat a year, suddenly realize they're not stupid, and they're, clearing dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, and, starting to learn and read properly and getting really good marks and, doing very well. And I've had parents in tears ring up and say, I don't know what's happened to my child, but it's just wonderful, the changes. Or, many teachers saying, I don't know what you're doing, but something's changed. What are you doing with this child?
Yeah. No,
for the high productivity and etc.
Yeah, definitely. And also, one of my people that came in to see me, one of my clients, my patients, she was studying for her law exams, and that's quite intense. And she said everything that she read, just her mind just absorbed it. So, and that was just after I put her on the flower essence for her specific studying purposes. And then, Ian, with regards to, we'll get to the white light and the light frequency range, but with regards to the ascension process, what I've done, I've said to people, it is the journey of self. A lot of things are going to be in people's face this year that they need to look and reflect and identify and work through. But from your perspective, flower essence regarding consciousness, higher consciousness, and for the listeners, which categories would those be? Which ones would those be best for?
Okay, look, I think there's a combination we have called meditation essence in the bush essence range. So, you've got the sacred lotuses in there working on the crown chakra. You've got the bush fuchsia, a remedy working on intuition, one for the pineal, the third eye. So that's a really quite lovely blend. And look, I might just jump in and talk a little about the light frequency essences.
Sure.
Because I think they're really specific to the time we're finding ourselves in. Like there's been a lot of hype about, the end of the Mayan calendar and the world's going to end was going to end on the 21st of December, etc. We are going through a tremendous change at the moment. There's a cycle that the Earth goes through every 64,000 years, and you roughly can divide it into quarters which correspond to a season. We've just entered, around this period, gone from an autumn into a winter. And you'll find that in wintertime, it's a more going within. There doesn't appear to be a lot going on the surface. there's what's happening underneath the ground. And you'll find with spirituality, people are going to be going a lot more inward. They won't be drawn so much into larger groups such as organized religions and things like that. It'll still have its place, but there won't be as much emphasis. There'll be a lot more inner work going on, and connection to spirit, to nature. And also corresponding with this time, there's a tremendous surge, not just happening here on the Earth. It's like that, right, certainly through the solar system. It's like that inner pulsing from the universe occurring. There's that raising of vibration. The Earth itself is part of that process. Gaia, we could call it, raising its vibration and consciousness. And part of that entails clearing the pollution that humanity has left on it. And that's both physical pollution, but also psychic pollution as well. And you'll find that some of the floods and earthquakes that we've experienced, more of that is going to occur. But there's also things like the changing of the poles, which is affecting our electromagnetic balance within ourselves. A lot of people are feeling very stressed by this. So the light frequency essences are dealing with all the changes. I mean, Gaia is waking up, if you like. There are closed energy portals, energies in plants, rocks, which are starting to sort of come up again. It's like the landscape's changing. It's trying to make a call to us to respond back to nature. Even somewhere like China, we make an essence called the China essence, where there's been massive destruction and disconnection, not just to the land on a physical level, but on a cultural level, where you can move 1 million people from their traditional roots to make way for dams or something like that and just move them when the people don't want to go. And, you know, Mao Zedong, during that period, there was the destruction of the culture. It's a very rich culture. They did keep people connected to the land. That was, I suppose, one of the positive things. But now there's just that wanton greed by the very wealthy and the politically in power. And, there's the sense of the old values are being thrown out for, short-term material gain. So we're finding that if that's the path you're going through, you're going to be seriously challenged. This is a time of connecting to nature, to spirit, and there are new energies in the stratosphere. And there's essences there for us to connect, to open up to these new energies. One of the remedies in the light frequency essences was made in Antarctica. And it's very much getting you to have a sense of what is essential in your life, not just on a material level, but in your goals, in your relationships, in your spiritual practice. What's really essential? And also, what doesn't matter? What do you need to really let go of? And I think we need to, be in touch with what's really essential and important in our lives in 2013, not just sitting down, watching TV and staying in the comfort zone. And, if we do, we're going to be shocked and jolted out of that. So you can go kicking and screaming, or you can go far more harmoniously. And I see the light frequency essences, integrating the divine masculine and feminine within ourselves, the connection to nature, and adjusting to all these changes occurring energetically around us. So to make that transition into this period far smoother. And time has speeded up. I'm sure nearly every person listening would agree that they don't have the same amount of time as what they had, even 3 or 4 years ago. Everything's speeded up. And if you keep trying to do all the same old things you did, you're going to get very stressed because you can't fit them in. You're going to have to let go of things. And working out what's your priority. And
a wonderful thing is which I've been saying it for almost the last decade, is the answers are within. Look at what you need to let the clutter go. And then obviously we work through that, and it's just become so beautiful. But Ian, for someone that's never ever started flower essences, would you say get them to start that first, or if they choose to go into the white light or the light frequencies, what would you recommend for newcomers?
I think the Antarctic essence could be a very nice one to start in light frequency, because you also get a deep sense of peace and calm. We've had people who've said, they'd never slept so well since taking that remedy. There was a a therapist in England who'd done some research on it, and he noticed that, serotonin levels were changing in the people who were taking that particular essence. So that could be a very nice one to start. I think what I would normally suggest to someone might be, what's the one area in your life that if you could change, you would like to change? It could be, a dynamic in a relationship. It could be, how you're learning. It could be, like you've, a lot of sadness you're carrying, or maybe it's a lot of impatience and resentment. What's the one thing you'd really like to change in your life? Once you can establish what that is, I think then maybe matching it with the appropriate bush essences, or maybe even looking at the white light frequency. The light frequency, we said Antarctica, for the white light essence range, which is working more at a soul level, we suggest you start with the water essence. And if there's a lot of old emotional states you're holding on to, it's a nice one to work very quickly to shift and clear them. And, we do notice a lot of people, when they take that remedy, cry a lot during that period. In fact, we've had some people say, no, I'm not going to take that water essence. All my friends have spent the time crying after taking it. But, crying is good. So I think Antarctica or water, or alternatively, look at what's the one area you'd like to change, then matching that up with the bush and the appropriate bush essence.
Yeah. No, definitely. And then the cards that you've got on, because when I ordered from you guys, it's actually difficult for us to get them. So I'll just get people here in South Africa. I just get people that go over, which are quite frequent, and then they bring me stock over. But you've got the cards that are available. I found just the resonance of the card also emits the energy of the flower. If you could just explain about the cards to us.
Yeah, sure. We call them the insight cards, and it's a laminated card. On one side, you've got the photographic image of the flower in color, of course, and just with a couple of key words. The back cover is universal. So they can be used very well as a diagnostic tool. So you can either just look at all the cards. And, many practitioners, their sole way of working is to get the client to look at the cards, choose the 3 that they're most drawn to, the ones they like the best, and also if there's one card they really dislike, don't like the look of it, to pull that one out as well. And then they spend the time discussing the qualities of the flower and seeing how the person who chose it can relate to it. And they tend to, the patient tends to open up a great deal when they're talking about the quality of the flower. And you can do it that way, and invariably people are drawn to the flower that's going to address the issues they're needing to work on. And children love them too. And as a practitioner, you can also use it if you're behind the schedule and you've got your next patient waiting, and you're 10, 15 minutes late. You can get them to work through, work with the cards. They're doing something quite constructive, and they're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs, getting impatient because you're not on time. The other way that you can use this diagnostic tool is without looking at, thinking about whatever problem that you might have, and shuffling cards while you're thinking of the problem. And then without looking, you just randomly choose a card. And again, it's a wonderful synchronicity. People almost invariably will draw a card that's very pertinent to that particular issue they're dealing with. In fact, after the first night of a workshop, one woman took the cards, and her husband was having a lot of difficulty with a situation at his workplace. And he was a bit skeptical about, it was going to do anything, but he went along to humor her, and he was quite shocked because the card he pulled up was just so specific. And he said, it must be a coincidence. And he sort of handed the cards back, and she said, okay, shuffle them up and do them again. Now, there are 69 cards. The odds of choosing the same card are 69 squared. So, it's many thousands to one, and he pulled the same card again. At that point, he surrendered that there was some synchronicity going on, and took the card. In fact, there is a veterinary clinic, and when the animal comes in, they have a largish room where they've scattered all the insight cards on the floor with a lot of space between each card, and they observe the animal going in the room, there's a one-way mirror, and they observe, it's a one-way window, and they observe which card the cat or the dog or whatever animal it may be will go and sit on. And they, again, that synchronicity that the animal has been drawn to that healing vibration coming from that card or what that flower embodies, and they give them that remedy.
So they actually give them the drops, because what I did to my cousin years ago for their dog, it had serious bad arthritis and mixed up a different, different flower essences in it. And I mean, this dog literally recovered. Yes, it was old. A year and a half later, it passed on. But the time after it took the flower essence, there was absolutely no stiffness, no pain. So, yeah, I mean, that I've observed it even with my little one. But I wanted to ask you, if people want to subscribe to they just go onto your website, they can get all the newsletters and stuff. They don't have to be therapists. Is that right?
Absolutely. No. I mean, I love that, you can have landscape gardeners coming to do it because they love plants, or some like to plant particular flower that they think their clients might need, or, just people who've got an interest in plants, like to use it, or again, want to, be able to use the remedies for their friends and family and what have you. My wife's a musician, and she plays in the opera in Sydney. She's a principal harpist there. And, musicians really have a hard time. They've got to play an opera, sometimes it goes for nearly, over 3 hours in with their heads or bodies that twist in very strange angles. Ergonomically, it's not very good being a musician in many cases. Also, to reach that level, a lot of the musicians, practiced lots and lots as when they were children and didn't spend as much time socializing. They were focusing so much on their instrument. Consequently, a number have, some a bit wobbly in their social skills. So she regularly used to be giving flower essences to people for all sorts of different problems, sometimes help with concentration and focus when they were playing, or to deal with the emotional side, and she, she was a musician. So, you can have all sorts of people using it, as well as, we have many practitioners who come because you can adapt it to the modalities you use. We have, GPs using it, medical specialists, acupuncturists who put the needle into a particular bottle. If they're going to be treating, say, the liver meridian, they'll put it into the essence which works on the liver, and then they'll stick the needle in. So there's no modality that you couldn't use with the bush essences. And, of course, you don't have to be a practitioner to be working with them.
Yeah. And then, Ian, with regards to the CD that comes with the white light pack, if there are some songs on there, as far as I remember, I think there's 7 or 8.
Yeah, very healing one. There's a system of numerology that I studied many years ago, and it was interesting that it wasn't just based on your name or your birth date, but also where you were born. It was a very complicated procedure to work out what we called the ruling number. For the ruling number, it corresponded to a color, and there were 8 colors. Each color had a corresponding musical piece. If you heard the musical piece connected to your color, it had like a healing effect on you, a very deep healing effect. So I had my wife Jane, I mentioned she's a harpist, principal harpist in the opera, and also a good friend of hers, Kirsty Williams, who's the concert master of the Sydney Symphony. So they recorded those 8 tracks, and so you'll find that if you're playing that CD, you will hear the track corresponding to your color, and there'll be one in particular which have a very strong healing effect on you. And we have people write in to say that they play the CD at night and their children go to bed very calmly and not arguing in the room, and they wake up more relaxed. Some people play it to their plants, and we had people who are growing plants. They find that when they're using that CD, their plants grow a lot quicker, or if they're growing sprouts, they grow twice as quick by having that music in the background. So, yeah, it was nice. I was able to work with Jane, my wife, on that project. And I just might add too, John, you mentioned the subscription. You can subscribe and get the newsletter, and that's you pay so much money a year, and there are 4 newsletters a year, one every season. But if you go to the website, you can also click on and receive 10 free videos, which I've done on the secrets of vibrant well-being. There's different themes, on meditation, there's diet, exercise, stress. So you get there for free, and stay tuned to our website, because we'll be releasing a lot of videos, free videos, about the individual flowers and what healing quality they've got. And they're shot with me out in the part of Australia where the flower grows, discussing their healing qualities.
Yeah. And then also, Ian, with regards for the audience, the flower essence come in a pack of 69, 2 boxes. That's right, eh?
Yep. They're the practitioner range. So if you were going to be wanting to work with them and use them quite a lot, that's the best way to do it, so you can make up your own combinations. And from one of those bottles of the 69, you can make up close to 40 what we call dose bottles. So they're a concentrate you get. We call it a stock level. And so you take, a few drops from that stock bottle, put into another bottle with brandy, a little bit of brandy as a preservative agent, water, or just if you don't want the brandy. And then, so that's the dosage bottle. That's the one that the person will take their 7 drops morning and night. So you can make, from one of those bottles, you can make up to about 40 individual remedies. Or you can just get the combinations, which are ready to go, don't have to be diluted. So, that's another option as well.
Right. And then, Ian, last question with regards to taking the stock and making a mixture for someone. I know in South Africa we struggle to get brandy at a much lower alcohol percentage. The lowest that we get is 38%. What would you recommend regarding that?
0.5, 38% is quite standard for brandy, and there's a nice connection why we use brandy rather than, say, vodka or gin. It relates back to that English doctor Edward Bach, because 2 of his remedies were connected to brandy, apart from the fact that he liked to tipple all 3 himself personally. One is that he's got a remedy called vine, and of course brandy is made from grapes which grow on a vine, and brandy traditionally matured in an oak barrel, and oak was another one of his remedies. But brandy is alive, it's living, where you'll find that ethanol, like my father offered to give me a big drum of ethanol when he retired. I was going to use the remedies, excuse me, but it was dead, inert, same as vodka or gin. So we use brandy as the best preservative. It will give you, many years preservative system. But there are options if people have problems. So I wouldn't be, worried about brandy being 38% proof. You're only using about a quarter of the bottle as brandy. The rest is water, and then you're putting in the concentrate. So, if someone's taking a dose bottle of 7, a dose of 7 drops of the dosage strength, they're only getting about 1.5 drops of brandy.
True.
And there are options you can use. There's other preservatives. You can use it topically. We find that a lot of the Muslim practitioners have been told by their clerics if they put the 7 drops into hot water, the hot water will evaporate the alcohol, and that's the way that a lot of the Muslim practitioners work.
Oh, fantastic! Okay. And then, Ian, just to end off, any words of wisdom for everyone listening? It will be as a podcast later on our station radio. So, any words of wisdom just to share to end off?
Look, it's really important that the period we're in, that we listen to our intuition. You mentioned, like how when you're working, that intuition is a very important thing. I think this is the time we've got to develop our own intuition, to really listen to that inner guidance and direction that we've got within. And I think that's working with love and integrity, opening up our heart chakras and sharing and generosity, but also going and doing that inner work ourselves, letting go of resentments that we're holding on. I think, this is a time to make some profound changes within ourselves. And, each of us working on ourselves is going to help change the planet. And if we don't make change, we stay the way we are emotionally, physically, then we're going to be challenged a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. Ian White from Australia, it's been absolutely amazing having you on. Thank you so much. Again, your website, it's ozflowers.com.au, and that's an A, the Oz is AUS flowers.com.au. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.